Abena sat quietly, her heart sinking as Esi's father took her hand and guided her out of the room. The tension hung heavily, the kind that even silence couldn't soften. Abena watched Esi's retreating figure, a hollow feeling taking root inside her. In that moment, she felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, frustration, and a deep, gnawing sadness. For months, she had wondered if things might somehow resolve, if Ya's decisions wouldn't leave such scars. But seeing Esi's family storm out, she realized that the damage Ya had caused was beyond repair. Ya was quiet too, watching his parents as they exchanged tense, angry whispers about the mess he had created. He glanced at Abena, whose face was stoic, but he could sense the sorrow and disappointment emanating from her. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. As the days passed, the fallout from Esi's family's confrontation only grew. Ya's parents were displeased, seeing their son's reputation tainted, their family pulled into unwanted scandal. Abena, though outwardly calm, was plagued by hurt and betrayal, silently watching as Ya seemed to drift further from her, bound now to both her and SC through tangled emotions and responsibilities. And SC, heartbroken and carrying Ya's child, was left grappling with her own turmoil. Months later, SC gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. News of the baby's arrival spread quickly, and the families gathered reluctantly at the hospital. Ya's heart swelled with pride as he held his newborn daughter, admiring her small features and feeling a fleeting moment of hope for the future. But this hope was fleeting, overshadowed by the mounting challenges waiting for him back home. Esi's father was there, but he kept his distance. As much as he cherished his granddaughter, he couldn't bring himself to fully forgive Ya. He had learned of Ya's past, including the child he had fathered with another woman before Abena. That knowledge weighed heavily on him. He didn't want his daughter tied to a man with such a tangled history. To him, Ya's actions showed a pattern of irresponsibility, and he wasn't about to let his daughter be another in a string of casualties. The tension in the hospital room was palpable. Ya's parents attempted to congratulate Esi's family, but every exchange was met with polite nods and tight-lipped smiles. Abena stayed silent, her face a blank mask. She had agreed to come, but only out of a sense of duty. She felt as if she were an outsider watching a drama she couldn't escape from. As weeks turned into months, Ya's situation began to unravel even further. His work, once steady, had taken a sudden downturn. Contracts that he'd relied on fell through, and clients began drifting away. The financial strain hit hard, not only affecting him but his entire family. Every conversation with his parents became an argument about money, and his relationship with Abena grew colder as his frustrations mounted. Ya found himself staying out late, avoiding the realities waiting for him at home. He often spent nights wandering the city, alone with his thoughts, searching for an answer he couldn't seem to find. His mind kept returning to the idea of starting over, far away from the mess he had made of his life. Friends had told him about Europe, about the opportunities there, the fresh start it promised. The idea became an obsession, a hope that grew stronger each time he faced the cold stares from Abena or the silence of Esi's father. Europe, he thought, would be his escape, his chance to prove to himself and everyone else that he could build a better life. But leaving wasn't simple. Traveling to Europe required money he didn't have. His savings had already been stretched thin supporting 2 families, and his work was unreliable at best. Desperate, Ya began seeking help from old friends, hoping to borrow enough to make his dream of escape a reality. Ya started reaching out to friends, some he hadn't spoken to in years. He swallowed his pride, crafting careful messages and rehearsing his requests, knowing that he needed all the help he could get. Each conversation brought mixed reactions. Some friends sympathized with his plight, while others turned him away, skeptical of his intentions. One night, he met with Kofi, an old friend who had known him since childhood. They met at a small cafe, and after a few pleasantries, Ya laid out his situation, explaining his financial troubles and his desire to go abroad. Kofi listened patiently, his expression unreadable. "Ya, I understand why you want to leave," he finally said, "but I have to ask. Are you doing this to escape your responsibilities?" Ya clenched his jaw, fighting the surge of defensiveness rising within him. "It's not about escaping," he said, his voice tense. "It's about starting fresh, finding a way to support my family properly." Kofi nodded, still looking unconvinced. "I'll help you with what I can," he said, "but remember, you can't run from the past. It'll follow you wherever you go." Ya thanked him, grateful for the assistance, but Kofi's words lingered, casting doubt over his plans. The question gnawed at him. Was he truly seeking a new life, or was he trying to run away from the mess he'd created? Despite the support he received from Kofi, it wasn't enough to fund his trip. Ya continued reaching out, his desperation growing with each rejection. Some friends expressed regret but explained that they couldn't risk their own finances. Others bluntly told him they didn't trust him with such a large sum, citing his past mistakes and failed commitments. As Ya struggled to gather the money, tensions between the families only grew. Esi's parents remained resolute in their disapproval, making it clear that they did not consider Ya a suitable partner for their daughter. Si herself was torn, caught between loyalty to her family and the complicated feelings she still harbored for Ya. She had hoped that having a child together might bridge the gap between them, but instead, it had only intensified the strain. Abena, too, was affected by Ya's turmoil. Though they shared a home, they lived as strangers, exchanging only brief, hollow conversations. She felt trapped in a life that no longer resembled the dreams they had once shared. Watching Ya drift further into his plans to leave, she realized that the man she'd loved was no longer the man beside her. In the background, the financial strain worsened. Bills piled up, and Ya's parents grew increasingly worried, knowing that their own stability was at risk. They urged him to reconsider his plans to leave, fearing that his absence would leave them unsupported. But Ya's determination was unshakable. He couldn't face the life he'd built for himself here, not with the shattered relationships and the constant reminders of his failures. Europe, in his mind, had become his last chance. As the day of his planned departure drew near, Ya finally gathered enough money through small loans and favors, though it was a precarious amount. He knew that leaving wasn't a guaranteed success, but he had convinced himself that anything would be better than the life he was leaving behind. The night before he left, he called Abena into the living room, hoping to offer her some form of explanation, even though he doubted she would understand. She stood there, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I know you don't want to hear this," Ya began, his voice rough with emotion, "but I have to go, Abena. I can't keep living like this." Abena met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "Do what you want, Ya," she said softly. "You always have." Her words stung, but he knew they were true. She turned and walked away, leaving him alone with his thoughts. For a moment, he wondered if he was making a mistake, if staying and facing his responsibilities was the path he should take. But that thought faded quickly, replaced by the yearning for a new beginning. In the early hours of the morning, Ya left without fanfare, without goodbyes. He carried with him only a small bag and a heart heavy with the weight of his choices. He boarded the bus that would take him to the airport, feeling a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. As the city he had known all his life faded behind him, Ya allowed himself a brief moment of hope, imagining the life he would build in Europe, far from the tangled relationships and unfulfilled promises he had left behind. But even as he looked ahead, he couldn't shake the feeling that the past would follow him, that the choices he had made would find him no matter where he went.